Yeah, this is better. It's also not so cold. Can we have one with a banner? I think so. Yeah, right. Actually. Should we start? Would you mind to give a cue to the production when it's the moment to have the speaker online on the screen? Just tell them, okay, we have now. Yeah, I haven't. Yeah. Okay. Mhm. I think we can get started. Should we? Just... Okay, so in the interest of time, we will get started. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome. Thank you for being here. It's a very tough slot because we're competing with the time of the declaration. So thank you very much for joining us. We're very excited to have on this very first ever designated Peace Day at COP. We'll be holding this panel Implications of Climate-Related Mobility for Peace and Security. Welcome to our very distinguished panel. I will be introducing them in a moment. My name is Tina Jaskolski. I work as climate peace and security policy scientist with the CGIAR focused climate security team. And I'm based at CGIAR's new MENA Climate Security Hub, which we have launched earlier this year. And I'm really happy to be moderating this panel discussion today. The panel focuses on the interactions between climate change, peace, and human mobility. Compounding and cascading effects of climate-related mobility not only increase the vulnerability of populations, but also pose real challenges to governments and humanitarian organizations to design responses that capture the complexity of all of these interconnected factors. While there's more efforts to design more integrated policy approaches in response to both climate change and mobility, of course, and peace, a lot of the important climate adaptation instruments, such as the national adaptation plans or the nationally determined contributions, are not really yet accounting for this nexus. So this session will identify some opportunities to enhance peace-positive climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies in the context of displacement, migration, and peace, exploring the remaining challenges also and looking at innovative approaches to the climate peace and security nexus. The panel discussion also gives me an opportunity to regionally launch our new CGIAR MENA Climate Security Hub, which we physically launched in Cairo in May of this year. The hub was created to generate more scientific evidence on the climate peace and security nexus in the region to help generate more awareness and raise capacities around the ways in which we can address the complexities of this nexus. And we're also doing a lot of policy advocacy work to see how decision makers and policymakers can actually start integrating climate security more successfully into policy and programming. In the region, our team is currently working as part of two CGIAR global initiatives. The first one being Fragility, Conflict and Migration, FCM, which we have just come back from. We've just come back from conducting some field work as part of this initiative in Jordan, looking at how communities that are already affected by resource scarcity and climate change and are now hosting large numbers of refugees and displaced people are co-negotiating peaceful, resilient livelihoods together. As part of another initiative, which is called Her Plus, we're looking at how we can integrate climate change into social protection strategies to see that people are protected from climate risks as part of the design of these strategies, but also to use these strategies to promote more climate smart behavior and, for example, climate smart farming. So we're very happy that this hub is now operational, and we look forward to building more strategic alliances and stronger networks across the region and further afield. Before we start our panel and I introduce our distinguished panelists, let me give you a few words of introduction about the format. We will have opening remarks, and we're very honored today to have somebody from Yemen representing the refugee community. She will provide some opening remarks at the beginning about her experience of displacement, and also to share her experience as a leader in driving local change and climate resilience. Then we will have one round of questions where each speaker will get 4 minutes to answer a question. We can then see if there's any questions from the audience. So if you do have questions, please save them for that time. And then we'll go back to the panel for some final comments. So now allow me to introduce our panel. We have seated here Ms. Iman El Hameli. Ms. El Hameli is an internationally displaced person living in Abs district in Yemen's northwest Hajj governorate. She leads a group of 10 women who run a solar microgrid plant. provides affordable energy to 50 households and was the inspiration behind 12 other solar plants that benefit more than 44,000 people in 4 governorates impacted by conflict and climate change in Yemen. Then we're also very honored to have Rania Ahmed with us. Rania is the Director of Peace and Development Coordination at the International Organization for Migration, IOM, based in Geneva. Ms. Ahmed has more than 28 years of hands-on experience in the design, leadership, and development of large-scale programs in complex emergency and development country contexts in the Middle East, Africa, and globally. Welcome up. We have Khalid Khalifa. Khalid is a senior advisor and representative to the Gulf Cooperation Council countries for UNHCR. Mr. Khalifa is a professional humanitarian worker with more than 25 years of experience in relief and development. He led humanitarian operations in various settings of natural disasters and complex emergencies. Then we have Nazanin Moshiri, International Crisis Group Senior Analyst for Climate, Environment and Conflict in Africa. Having had a very long career in journalism, Nazanin now provides analysis through reports and media contributions, as well as fact-based insights for policymakers on how to best respond to climate-related security risks. Online is joining us Dr. Lex Tackenberg. Dr. Tackenberg is the senior advisor on the question of Palestine at the Arab Renaissance for Democracy and Development at ARDD in Amman, Jordan. Thank you for joining us online, Lex. Dr. Tackenberg has held various field and headquarter positions at UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, for 30 years, and also teaches at Fordham University. So you can see we have a very rich, very experienced panel. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. And let me now hand it over to Ms. El Hameli, who will provide some opening remarks on the actual first-hand experiences of what it means to be displaced, but also her experiences as a real community leader and driver of change. Ms. El Hameli will speak in Arabic, but I'm very thankful we have Ola here from UNHCR who will be translating. So please, Iman. I think the mic is not working.
السلام عليكم. أنا إيمان الحملي من محافظة حجة، نازحة من حرض إلى عبس.
اسمي My name is Iman Al-Hamali. I am internally displaced in Hajj Governorate in Yemen.
مشروعي هو عبارة عن محطة طاقة شمسية البديلة.
My project is a solar plant for sustainable energy, renewable energy.
طبعا بعد ما نزحنا من محافظة حجة من حرض إلى عبس في عام 2015 تعرضنا لعدة كوارث مؤثرة جدا.
After we were displaced in 2015 from our governorate from Abs to Hajj, we were faced with lots of disasters along the way.
فلذلك المؤثرات انقطاع الشبكة الوطنية للكهرباء في المديرية التي نزحنا إليها.
Where we went, there was a problem with the national grid of electricity covering the area where we were living.
فقررت أنا وشريكاتي بتلبية احتياجات المجتمع ولو بعض من الاحتياجات الأساسية وهي الكهرباء.
That's when I decided with a number of partners to start the solar plant to provide a solution for that problem.
لذا اتجهنا نحو برنامج التمكين الاقتصادي لمؤسسة التنمية المستدامة.
That's when we went to the Sustainable Development Foundation to start our project for economic empowerment.
للبحث عن تمويل وتكلفة الإنشاء المنظومة الطاقة الشمسية.
And we proposed the project to look for funding at that foundation to provide sustainable energy.
تم انضمامنا في برنامج تعزيز القدرة على الصمود في الريف اليمني.
Also, we proposed a project for resilience
تعزيز القدرة على الصمود
to improve the ability of resilience for displaced people.
الممول من الاتحاد الأوروبي والاتحاد المائي.
So this project was ended up to be funded by UNDP.
حصلنا على المنحة للطاقة الشمسية، وهي عبارة عن مجموعة من الألواح والبطاريات.
So the funding was to cover a number of solar panels and batteries.
رغم التحديات التي واجهناها في مجتمعنا اليمني.
Despite of the challenges that we were faced with at the Yemeni society.
من التحديات هو من المرأة الدخول إلى سوق العمل في الطاقة الشمسية أو في أي عمل آخر.
Obviously, there was a problem of preventing women from entering the job market and to have jobs in general.
أنا وشريكاتي تخطينا هذه التحديات والصعوبات بكل جدارة وانكسار القيود والعادات والتقاليد في المجتمع الذي نعيش فيه.
So I did quite a good job with my partners to overcome these challenges and do our best to work for the society where we live.
ما زال المشروع من عام بدأنا المشروع في عام 2019 وما زال مستمر إلى وقتنا هذا 2023.
Our project of the solar grid was launched in 2019 and it's still running.
استفاد منه المجتمع في الإضاءة الليلية وتوفير لأطفالهم المذاكرة والراحة التامة.
So the households that's connected to our grid, of course, had benefited from the project. 50 households, 50 منزل المشبوك صح؟ 50 households. And of course, there were an improvement in the amount of electricity that they receive. They now have lighting at night and they can do studying for their kids. 50 households is about 170 individuals benefiting from the project.
فما زال المشروع مستمر وهناك طلب مشتركين كثيرين للاستجابة للطاقة الشمسية وإشراكهم معنا، ولكن للأسف المحطة لا تستطيع القدرة الهائلة لإقبال المشتركين للمحطة.
So we do receive a lot of requests for other households to also join the grid, but unfortunately, with the capacity that we have, there is a lack of funding that prevents us from growing the project into something bigger.
كذلك عدم من الاحتياجات المطلوبة للمحطة هو بناء البنية التحتية من انجراف السيول والأمطار.
There is also something else affecting our area, which is the lack of infrastructure that prevents or protects the area when there is flooding or extensive rain.
عدم وجود استثماريين محليين أو أجنبيين لتوسعة المشروع.
So she will speak to us now about the challenges that's facing her project.
من التحديات عدم وجود مستثمرين محليين أو أجنبيين للمشاريع للتكيف مع البيئة.
Yes, so we were trying to grow our project, but there is lack of funding, and we don't find a lot of investors who are willing to help us grow the project and make it bigger.
عدم وجود كادر مؤهل لتنفيذ الطاقة الشمسية وإدارتها.
Okay, there is also a need to do capacity building of individuals in order to join our team in running and the management of the solar plant.
عدم وجود ندرة المهندسين الموجودين في اليمن في الطاقة الشمسية والتغير والتكيف مع البيئة.
Obviously, there is also lack of engineers and local individuals who have the capacity and the knowledge to run the project and help in mitigating the effects of climate change.
ممكنة. لذا يحتاج اليمن لإنشاء برامج تعالج المعوقات للتكيف والتخطي المخاطر البيئية.
So we feel like Yemen is in desperate need for more of of this kind of projects to help mitigate the effects of climate change and yeah, provide more solutions to these problems.
باقي دقيقة ولا ما بيش؟ خلاص.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Iman, for sharing your story with us. And I mean, such a wonderful example of the strength and leadership of women, right? To improve local livelihoods and the local situation in a context that is impacted by conflict and displacement. I would like to turn, I hope we can get back to you, Iman, when we have the Q&A time. Let me now ask the first question to Rania, our panelist. In several contexts across the globe, where we're increasingly seeing areas that are characterized by protracted displacement and conflict, and that are also being highly exposed to climate change, which is further complicating the humanitarian and development aid responses. What are some of the specific protection risks displaced and refugees communities may face in setting considerable vulnerable to climate may face in settings considered vulnerable to climate change impacts, and what is the role of implementing agencies in response to these? Sorry, I messed that up.
It's okay.
So what can we do in response to this? Thank you.
No, thank you so much, and thank you for inviting us, and شكرا إيمان for sharing your story. شكرا لأنك شاركتينا قصتك. It takes a lot of courage for women like Iman to come here today and speak to all of us. يعني ده شجاعة منك إنك تقدري تيجي النهاردة وتكلمينا كلنا. So thank you for that. شكرا. Actually, I'm being based in Geneva now, but I've been for 28 years working in the field. And I'm so proud of being working in the field, leading maybe 8 emergency responses in Middle East and Africa. But I'm not proud of the responses of every one of us because the world is going backward, unfortunately. Lots of the countries who's affected by displacement and refugee crisis and migration is also affected by multiple crises, protracted crisis, economic situation, pandemic, and over and above the climate change, which actually affect acceptance as a start of the displaced people into different areas in different countries. Because the challenge of the host communities, because of climate change and other factors, to access food, services, water, for them is huge. So adding to that, a refugee community or displaced communities or migrants community is actually considered to be one of the most protection issues that can face displaced and migrants and refugees communities everywhere. And Mr. Khaled with us here will talk more about the refugees. But actually also, this is not the only thing. Most of these areas that's vulnerable to climate change and other factors are already suffering from protection issues. Protection in camps for women and children and girls, protection issues when it comes to violation to different rights in different areas, but also protection of the basic access to services that they cannot do it in a lot of the areas. So protection for me is the implementation of the whole fora of human rights and the child rights and women rights, but also the rights of a migrant and displaced person as well as refugees, of course, to be able to survive with freedom and access the services that they need to access. What we need to do and what is the constraint to do it, I think what we need to do is a lot, but starting by recognizing that we have a bigger problem and we cannot tackle climate change only as a climate change crisis. We need to tackle that as a holistic crisis, understanding that it come over and above multiple existing crises in the same environment. We need to educate host communities about why people displaced migrated on why they come to occupy this space and how we can live together to ensure social cohesion. But also we need to go away from the ongoing current packages that's not working anymore. I was just speaking on an event around clustering. The current packages that the cluster system been coordinating for years is not working anymore. Climate change, human mobility, resilience of the communities and peace has to come hand in hand, has to be on the table hand in hand. The voices of the communities. I'm so proud that we are sitting in a panel where we have Iman presenting the communities, presenting experience. We have private sector, we are UN agencies coming together because it's time for us to come together hand in hand. Otherwise, it will not work. Over that, I would also encourage the academia on science who can help really bringing the academia part, the science part to find a solution for a very complicated problem. What we've been doing in this situation as an example, that we've been working in countries like Iraq, which has a multiple crisis actually. There was the Mosul, there was displacement, there was extracted crisis, economic situation, but also there was a drought. And we've been specifically working with women like Iman and with young people to in a community very similar by the way where women doesn't have access to um, easily to education but if they have access to education it gets very challenging to be able to find a job and sustain their own lives and their children's lives. So we've been working with them on the ground on an entrepreneurship ideas where we work with them, but also we work with the host communities and we work with raising the awareness on importance of empowering communities who are household to sustain their own living. And ideas are amazing that come from these countries, from the women, from the young people, the passion to learn, the passion to not want a bag of food or a bottle of water, but actually to have their own project or program, and how one woman who started the project can actually support other five women to help them whether to get fund to continue their education or to raise their children or to support their extended family, etc. So I think a lot still need to be done. And, and I'm so glad that in this COP this time we're not talking about frameworks and research, but we're talking about how to come together, all of us. And yeah, now maybe there is no a lot of participants because we signed all a declaration for recovery, relief, and peace and climate change, which is extremely crucial and important. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rania. Just as a quick follow-up question, because Iman has provided this amazing story about the provision of electricity locally, do you think there's a change in thinking around including local initiatives like that in our responses on the ground?
Yes, and it has to be. And I just mentioned the story that I was in Syria in El Bab village in Aleppo. And actually, one of the ladies there told us, we don't want a bottle of water. Help us. There is a factory at the end of the village. Help us getting electricity, and we will be able to open this factory and generate water and land our farms, etc. We started it was IOM, a Climate Mobility Innovation Lab, and the whole idea of the lab is to do innovative bottom top approach where we bring the communities because they have the problem and the solution. We also bring science, academia, private sector, other UN agencies to sit with us where we can use and scale up these initiatives from one country to other countries, but also from one area to countrywide to sustain results at scale. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rania. So let me turn to Dr. Tackenberg online. Lex, you're working for ARDD. So in Jordan, Jordan is a country that is hosting a large number of refugees, both in camps and in host communities. And ARDD has worked with refugee populations across Jordan for a long time, contributing to protection, advocacy efforts, as well as research and evidence generation and legal support. Could you elaborate a bit on the challenges both refugee and host communities are facing in Jordan in the context of climate change, and what ARDD is doing to boost resilience and integration in the sense of, or in the context of generating peaceful and resilient local livelihoods? Over to you, Lex.
Thank you very much, and it's great for DNDB to join you in this panel today, even remotely. Just a few words about DNDB. Acronym stands for Arab Renaissance for Democracy and Development, and that is not just a name; it's essentially also our mission statement, which the organization aspires to contribute to transformation and development and promotion of democracy in Jordan and in the Arab region through a combination of different programs and projects. It was established in 2008, and the overall aim is to support marginalized individuals and communities in Jordan and in the Arab region, acquiring and enjoying their social, political, and economic rights. The organization has a large legal aid program with 10 legal aid offices around the kingdom, including in those Syrian refugee camps in the north. And it also implements a range of different programs and projects in the domain of its mandate. And since 2018, it set up a research center that engages in research and advocacy with respect to various activities and programs that the organization engages in. Then, to your question, Jordan faces several and interconnected environmental challenges that cause economic and social struggles for both refugees and host communities. Moreover, the strain on already limited resources exacerbates existing social and economic disparities, further compromising social cohesion and the well-being of these communities. The most pressing challenge, not surprisingly, to be tackled is water scarcity. According to national studies and different UN agencies, Jordan is the second most water scarce country in the world and has the lowest per capita share of water. Diminishing water supply, rising temperatures, and reduced precipitation intensifies competition among vulnerable populations for access to water resources, affecting agriculture, food production, health, energy, and the economy. In Jordan, the agricultural sector's contribution to the GDP declined significantly from 8.3% in 1994 to only 3.5% in 2016. This shift is attributed to the evolving climate and compels Jordanian farmers to cultivating crops that require water, now more resilient to higher temperatures, as well as increased reliance on herbicides and fertilizers. Unsustainable farming practices, as a result of this, have led to severe pollution of groundwater and rivers, resulting in the closure of a majority of farms along these waterways, in turn hampering Jordan's potential social and economic advancement and Jordan's water and security. So what do we do as organization about this? In face of these various challenges, ARDD has been working tirelessly to enhance the host communities and refugees' resilience towards climate change adverse effects, providing, and I already mentioned this, legal aid, program implementation, research, and advocacy. ARDD's interventions aim not only to alleviate immediate environmental stressors, but also to enhance the resilience and integration of both refugees and host communities. Therefore, the core of my work is about fostering social cohesion between refugees and host communities, recognizing that sustainable solutions must address the interconnected challenges faced by all vulnerable. Its initiatives promote economic opportunities, education, and access to justice for everyone, irrespective of their background.
Okay, thank you so much, Lex, for this. Let's give him some applause.
You're getting some of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Lex, for those examples of your valuable work in Jordan. I think such a great example of how peace really matters on the ground as people are sharing resources and sharing livelihoods in places that are hosting, displaced people. So I think you've talked about education, you've talked about equal access, about law support. I think those are very practical examples of how we can possibly create such a peace positive environment on the ground. And I think very important entry points for other organizations also to think about in terms of how do we make our approach peace positive on the ground. Thank you so much, Lex, for that. Turning to Nazanin Moshiri. So, Nazanin, research has shown that the integration of mobility dynamics and specific vulnerable groups, such as refugees, migrants, IDPs, into key national adaptation and mitigation strategies, such as the NAPs and the NDCs, remain fairly nascent. So, and it's early days for this, but particularly in terms of proposing specific solutions, and particularly when it comes to proposing specific solutions. But how can we ensure that the specific vulnerabilities and capacities of refugees are integrated into climate adaptation and mitigation planning instruments, also with a view to making them more peace positive?
Thank you so much for inviting me. And it's been just fantastic listening to the other participants, particularly the example that we had from Yemen, from somebody who's actually there on the front lines of these crises. So I have worked for many years as a journalist covering conflict, and more recently working at International Crisis Group, looking at these intersections. And I have to say, in answer to your question, one of the things that is lacking the most, from what I see, is political will. Political will to include internally displaced people, to include refugees into these frameworks, and also in terms of including climate risks and climate action into planning as well for NAPs, NDCs, etc. I also feel like there is a gap there in terms of data collection and analysis on these issues, and understanding the specific vulnerabilities. Like a lot of my work is based in Africa, and I've been working more recently in the past year in Somalia. So just to give you an example, when you're looking at displacement mobility in Somalia, it's not gender is of course important and disaggregating data along gender lines, but also there are clan dynamics in Somalia. So there are certain clans that make up most people who are marginalized and displaced internally. There are some clans who are more able, because they're majority clans, to move to the diaspora or move out of Somalia, and then they can support their communities back home as well. So understanding this is really important, understanding these dynamics. Also, urbanization. Somalia is one of the fastest growing urbanized communities. During this past period, you have war and drought, which is basically emptying rural areas. A third of the population have moved to cities. Are we taking this into account when we're looking at mobility and we're looking at these legal frameworks? Often we're looking at human mobility through these frameworks in a negative way. People are displaced, it's really bad. They're not going to go home. How are we going to cater for this? But often mobility is used as a way of coping, uh, adapting to these changes. So there is a Kampala Declaration where I'm based. So I'm in Nairobi, and Kampala is a capital of Uganda. And many countries have signed up to this declaration, which looks at human mobility and adaptation and climate action. Problem again is political will and implementing this declaration. So taking it off the page and making sure that it actually works in practice for people who are moving across borders to try to survive, conflicts and also the changing climatic factors. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I maybe ask you, what are the strategies in terms of including people into framing something like a declaration like this? I mean, are people really included from the beginning, as Rania was saying earlier? I mean, how do we make sure we're bringing people together in framing these responses?
I think IOM and UNHCR and other agencies are doing a great job of that, of trying to get these community voices heard. But you're right, a lot of these declarations are basically, sorry to say, a bunch of ministers who get together and sign these agreements and declarations, and there's very little kind of community involvement. Um, and also, it's not passed down to the ground. So, for example, during this past drought in the Horn, which lasted 2.5 years, unprecedented, 5 failed rainy seasons, a lot of pastoralist communities wanted to cross borders simply to find pasture and water for their herds. And, even with this Kampala Declaration, many of them were unable to do so. They were unable to move across, see those places as borders. That's what they've been doing for years to try to adapt. But unfortunately, because we have borders, because we have these issues over security sometimes, they were unable to find pasture and water for their herds, and we saw millions of livestock, millions, dying during this past drought in the Horn of Africa.
Okay. Thank you so much for elaborating. And I think, I mean, often there's goodwill, but I think it's really time to think about concrete mechanisms and frameworks on how to include people at all stages of the policy design and implementation process. Over to you, Khaled. So looking a little bit more into this transition from short-term humanitarian towards more development aid approaches, we're seeing in a lot of the protracted crises in the region that people are staying. Lex has been talking about Jordan, where some people have been staying in camps for 10 years or longer in communities. So how do we make sure, or let me get to the question. So can you maybe give us some examples in the context of this humanitarian development piece nexus of how UNHCR has, together with other partners, been promoting the bridging of humanitarian development response modalities in the context of the climate crisis, and what are some of the challenges that that remain in bridging from the shorter term to the longer term?
Thank you, Tina. And pleasure to be with all of you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And I also join my colleagues who thanked Iman for being with us. And this is probably the first point in what I wanted to say. It is a big part of the solution that people themselves who are suffering from displacement or from different disasters become empowered enough. I think until now, we are all doing lip service to the localization agenda. And the localization of humanitarian assistance or development work will offer the solutions for the future. In Arabic, we have a very interesting program that summarizes actually the localization agenda. We say محك جلدك مثل محك ظهرك مثل ظفرك. Nothing can scratch your back better than your own nails. And this is true. If we empower people, I think they can come up with much better solutions than what we designed for them from outside and the international community, the large organizations, the UN, and all the international NGOs that try to do the job for communities instead of them doing it better than we do. That's one. Second, you spoke about protraction, and many people in the room, colleagues here, spoke about protraction. This is a major, major challenge. It is related to the other challenge, which is whatever you call it, humanitarian development nexus. I mean, I don't know what does that mean, but it is a term that has been used and it became used without really thinking about its true meaning and putting a clear demarcation line between humanitarian and development, in my view, is not realistic, not rational, and not correct, neither from a technical perspective or operational perspective. And probably that created a big part of the problem. The disasters we are dealing with are protracting beyond imagination. So you have the Afghans, for example, who are living in Pakistan and Iran. How many years are they displaced? 44 years. Is that really protracted emergency, or we need to call it something else? And then the Syrians. You mentioned the ones living in Jordan, the ones who are living in Turkey, and then another disaster comes on top of it, the earthquake. What do we call that? A disaster on top of a disaster, compounded disaster on top of protracted disaster. We are out of terms actually to describe the reality that is happening. There is a glimpse of hope in the middle of all of that. I think the international community is starting to think differently about finding solutions, simply because whatever we are doing is not working. The numbers are growing exponentially every year. We have not seen a decline in the number of displaced people over the last 11, 12 years. Every year, the figures jump in millions. Last year, we were talking about something in the ballpark of 100. This year, 114. Next year, I'm sure we'll be talking more than 120. How do you deal with that? You are talking with a huge, huge caseload that is very difficult for one entity to deal with. And the international humanitarian system has never been good enough to join hands and deal with a problem because of the other factors that stop us from dealing with the root causes. So the international community has been providing band aid, has been providing uh, painkillers for many, many years, and dealing with the root causes is very difficult, and sometimes it's outside the scope and the control for of humanitarian organizations. All those are challenges that I'm talking about. Then the concept of equality, that refugees, for example, displaced people, should be treated equal. Sometimes this is also not correct, because equality in that context is very unfair to displaced people who cannot even open a bank account, cannot educate their children, do not have access to health care, do not receive the same education. If you give them equal access to markets, they will still not be able. What is required is equity. What is required is looking at areas of vulnerability and trying to remedy those, so when there is an equal opportunity, they can compete. But everybody is dealing with equality, and not enough organizations are dealing with equity. What is working is the role of development organizations, development actors, and the private sector. And I think those two stakeholders started somehow to cover part of the gap that humanitarian organizations couldn't. An example, which is the answer to the direct question, in Jordan, we established a big solar farm at Al Azraq camp because we simply used to pay $1 million on electricity per month. So per year, you pay 11, $12 million on electricity bills. We, with the support of IKEA, the IKEA Foundation, and the Saudi Fund for Development, And this brings the two sides of this equation, the private sector and the development actor. They work together, funded this project that now covers most of the energy needs for Al Azraq camp. And one day, inshallah, when the camp is not needed anymore, this farm will be a big asset for Jordan itself. It will serve the community and the host community around the camp. This is a very good example. And this is something that humanitarian donors are not willing to invest in. So if a humanitarian donor who is more interested in band aid and the blanket and the tent and the food for today, which is also needed, is not interested in the long term, you need to find a solution. Those solutions are proving to work, and we have a lot of examples where our cooperation in innovative finance, in Islamic philanthropy, in localization of interventions have proven to work. And I think the solution is to make this at scale in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Khaled, for this. Yeah. Thank you for this great example of bringing in the private sector as well, right, to come up with longer term solutions, and very thoughtful about, you know, questioning what do we really mean by the HDP nexus, and how does it play out on the ground. Do we have any questions from the audience? Does anyone have any burning questions in the room? I don't see anyone. If not, we have a few more minutes. Khalid, you have started telling us about what works. Perhaps we could collect a few other examples, out of your professional lives. I mean, what are really good examples of strategies that are responding to the complexity of climate change, that are directly engaging refugees, migrants, displaced people in formulating and implementing policies, and that are designed to foster social cohesion, positive approaches to this nexus of climate mobility and peace. Rania, do you have any particular example that you might want to share?
No, thank you so much for this question. Actually, we just finalized a roadmap for IOM. We have a new director general, and we worked on a roadmap on climate mobility. And we have done a lot of consultation, including with the communities, with climate champion, with other agencies, etc. And climate change specifically cannot be, it's a cause. It's not a thematic area of focus. And to handle a cause, you have to look at it like displaced communities, refugees communities, migrants communities are our beneficiaries that we serve. This is the human aspect of it. And you cannot handle that only by looking into um, this without looking into the evidence and data and scale it up. Look into push factor, pull factor, early warning. How can we leverage the data and the evidence that can create for us scenario to work with the communities on the prevention, on anticipation, but also on adaptation measures? We cannot also do that alone. We have to do it with a strategic partnership. And it was a lesson for us that strategic partnership, while we are one UN and we complement each other, we have the clustering system, it has to come and has been emphasized with the global stocktake of Paris Agreement that for the first time, private sector is here sitting with us on the table, academia and science universities, migrants and displaced communities themselves. We have in the pavilion 40 young people coming displaced from the seeds, from the small islands, from Africa. It's brilliant. They come with amazing, innovative ideas that can really, really help to shape things differently. And then there where we will be able to advocate to support lots of different frameworks like the Global Compact for Migration, the Senadai framework, and others that can really allow us to influence policymakers. We can sit into loss and damage and speak with the voice of the migrants, of the young people, of the host communities, of the needs, rather than of a number of people in New York and Geneva that they know the problem, but really they don't know the situation as these young people and communities and ladies like Iman and others who really know the solution. So I think for us this is the key pillars. And the last pillar is when it comes to implementation, holistic approach, geographical focus.
Mhm.
You don't go to people and talk about wash when they don't have a toilet. We don't go and talk about health when there is no health clinic. Education without access to education for children or displaced communities in camps. So holistic approach, and here where we come together. And the project in Al Azra camp is brilliant.
Mhm.
It's innovation. But also what we need to do is in every, and this will be the way to go for IOM, that we will go geographically and see what can we do holistically through different thematic area, and what we don't do we'll ask others to do, like UNHCR and Comfort and others, to come and support us with. Thank you.
Thank you. So good news about more collaboration happening everywhere. Lex, can you maybe in maximum 2 minutes give us an example from your sorry, put you on the spot, from your experience in Jordan? Just an example that something that has worked in terms of.
Yeah. One project that we implemented not long ago in collaboration with a so media organization, and together with them we implemented a project aimed at strict dialogue and enhancing youth participation in climate change discussions, was supported by the Office of Green Roads Department of the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The project conducted preliminary research, organized a media competition, Youth Green Voices Challenge, and the policy labs involving young environmental activists and media creators from 6 Arab countries: Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Libya, Yemen. And it resulted really in fruitful insight and recommendations, amplifying youth perspective, the youth talking about advocating climate initiatives that integrate development and peace building efforts. They embrace regional approaches to environmental protection. They reached a training of Arab media and environmental matters, and worked with us on sort of disseminating their views and their recommendations for sort of practical implementation, scaling up in other parts of Jordan as well as the region. So that was a very good experience for us.
Okay, thanks for sharing that, Lex. Nazanin, from your career. Oh, sorry, do we have a question now? Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I just have two quick questions. It's a really interesting discussion. The first one to you, Ms. Moshiri. You mentioned that there is a lack of data collection, specifically on the vulnerabilities. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Jasper Linke from Impact Reach. You mentioned that there is a lack of data on the better understanding the vulnerabilities and needs of displaced and host communities. What do you think would be solutions to improve the availability of such data? And is there already good, like especially like large scale quantitative data, comparable data at national scale or even regional scale to fill those gaps? And then the second question to the IOM and UNHCR representatives, you mentioned, of course, like that we need to have a more holistic view of looking at people displaced or migrating because of climate factors. Do you like what would be? Do you think that there is kind of an issue right now with an underreporting of climate-induced displacement because of the focus on immediate conflict triggers, while not often not understanding why conflict is actually might be linked to climatic issues? And are there some attempts maybe to dig deeper into those reasons in both of your organizations to actually measure better when people are displaced, not just because of conflict, but climate-induced conflict? Sorry.
Thank you. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'm so glad that Reach is sitting with us because they are one of the organizations that really advance in qualitative data. IOM has a displacement tracking matrix. It's a great tool. I've been using that even when I was not IOM in all our analysis and trend analysis, etc. But what I want to tell you is that it's not only the displacement tracking matrix, it's how you use this data and leverage that to work with organizations like Reach, IONACR, and others to look into the qualitative aspect of it. And that's why we are now combining the DTM with private sector. We just launched our partnership with Microsoft yesterday, but also with the conflict sensitivity analysis. And this is responding also to your second question. Evidence and data is a treasure, but numbers only doesn't work unless we see the full picture and connect the dots and look at it from different perspectives. That's why I said in my first intervention, climate change cannot be looked at only as a climate change. You have to look into the bigger picture, the conflict sensitivity, the security situation, political situation in a country, but also the economic situation and how this all add up into risks of conflict, disturbance of peace, but also potential further negative implication on the whole of the community. So yes, again, back to the data, but more into how data can work for us, not us work for data. Thank you.
There was another question for Nazanin, right? For you.
Okay.
Sorry.
I can add,
1 minute.
yeah,
We have 1 minute.
in 1 minute. I can add to summarize what I said. Basically, I think the solution is threefold in my view. One, that big picture, we should not really close our eyes to the big picture. The responsibility of the world leaders, the 1.5 degree Celsius, the loss and damage fund, peace and security. This is the job and the role of world leaders, and they need to sort that out before the world is damaged. Then we need to focus on scaling up what works and the initiatives that really work in the field. And the third is that we do not mix the two together, so that we do not imagine that scaling up small initiatives can actually solve the world problems. That will not happen. We'll be deceiving ourselves. We need to focus on both simultaneously and make sure that they actually feed into each other.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to say that Reach is doing an incredible job actually at looking at the vulnerabilities and disaggregating and looking at these different dynamics. I totally agree with what's been said, that data isn't enough. We do need um, the interviews on the ground. And again, that's to do with capacity, because when people were being displaced in Somalia, for example, Reach did a good job, but Reach and IOM didn't have the capacity to be asking those follow-up questions, which would be then very useful for policy makers to understand the dynamics in a deeper way than just the fact that people have been displaced by conflict or by drought. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question and for the responses. We have to wrap it up here. I know you're already kind of getting ready to run to other panels. It's been a really rich discussion about integrating people more truly into the design of solutions, and I think that's a very good theme for the Peace Day. Thank you so much for all your valuable inputs. Thank you, Iman, for sharing your story about women's leadership in display situations of where displacement and conflict and climate change are coming together. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you all for being with us today, and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye bye. Oh, we have a group photo first. Yeah, don't run away. We have a Ola.